Good evening, distinguished guests, Your Eminence, and members of the Washington Cojite Foundation. My name is Ana Corina Sosa Machado, and it is an honor to stand before you today and accept the Global Courage Award on behalf of my mother, Maria Corina Machado. It is my mother who should be standing here tonight accepting this esteemed recognition, but she's been barred from leaving Venezuela for over a decade. In our country, the fight for freedom comes at an unimaginable cost. My mother's courage and commitment to defending truth have shaped not just my life, but the life of millions of Venezuelans. I remember like it was yesterday, the night before my mother was ordered to the prosecutor's office in Venezuela, unjustly accused for conspiracy and treason by the Chavista regime. My mother was facing a 12-year prison sentence, and I was only 13 years old. That night, as I was preparing for school the next morning, my mother pulled up a chair beside me and held my hand and told me that she was going to turn herself in. And I knew very well the level of corruption she would encounter in the prosecution and the grave risks she would face. My mother looked me in the eyes that night and told me she didn't know when we were going to see each other again. And in her absence, I had to step up and take her place and protect my two younger brothers, Ricardo and Enrique. And that was, frankly, the first time that I could witness my mother, how she wasn't able to reassure me that everything was going to be okay. But the courage with which she spoke that night, when she explained why she was doing it, that she was doing it for my future, the future of my brothers, and the future of my country. It is in those moments that I understood that she stood for something far greater than herself, my brothers, or I. She was willing to sacrifice her own freedom for the pursuit of freedom of all Venezuelans. If there is one thing that I've learned from my mother, is that courage and truth are our most powerful weapons in the disarmament of evil in this world. That truth is not a tool merely to be used when it's convenient, non-controversial, or safe, but rather truth is of most importance in the darkest of times, when nobody else dares to speak it, when doing so means alienating yourself from your allies and even risking your own life. Truth has been my mother's constant companion throughout her career and her entire life. My mother called the Venezuelan regime a dictatorship and a mafia state when nobody else dared to say it. And for that, she was called an extremist. My mother stood up in the National Assembly, as you saw, and berated Hugo Chavez, telling him that the expropriations of Venezuelan businesses was theft, and for that she was called a radical. My mother spoke to the people of Venezuela about the dignity of hard work in a country filled with words of communism and government handouts, and for that she was called crazy. Maria Corina Machado has not been intimidated by the constant threats on her life and the safety of my family. She stood firm in the National Assembly when she was brutally assaulted and later hospitalized. And she did not change course when she stood alone for many years without allies. What is unfolding today in Venezuela is unbelievable in many ways. There's hundreds and thousands of people filling the streets in every corner of the country, trying to get a glimpse of my mother and hearing Maria Corina Machado's speech. It is truly a phenomenon we have never encountered before. The historical turnout in the opposition's presidential primaries in October seemed unimaginable, despite all the obstacles that the government imposed. People still showed up. Yet I'm not the slightest bit surprised. Venezuelans have been living under tyranny for decades, marked by humiliation, stripped of freedom and dignity, being fed lies and divisive rhetoric of hatred. And we have said, enough, enough. Maria Corina Machado speaks of an existential fight that is much greater than any presidential election. She appeals to the free individual, the human dignity, and the reunification of families. She is replacing humiliation for dignity, division for unity, and suppression for hope. Guided by her courage and truth, she has restored hope to millions of Venezuelan families that have been separated by this crisis, allowing them to envision that day when their children are able to return home once again in Venezuela. Our country is facing a moment of reckoning, and Maria Corina Machado is our beacon of hope. It takes courage, it takes extraordinary courage to lead a country to freedom. And as a Venezuelan and her daughter, I will always admire her for that. Gracias.